The sun rises over Egypt, birthplace of an ancient civilization, the land of the Sphinx. The Valley of Kings. Nothing lives here. This inhospitable place is the burial ground of Egyptian royalty. Over 3,000 years ago, a boy king was buried here, a king of little importance. His name, Tutankhamun. Tutankhamun departed this life at the age of 18 and was buried close to his royal predecessors. In 1922, Howard Carter, an English archaeologist, found the entrance to the tomb which had lain undisturbed for 3,700 years. This was the sight that greeted him. Now, for the first time in this country, some of the treasures of Tutankhamun's tomb have been brought here for exhibition. This once-in-a-lifetime exhibition at the British Museum was opened by royalty. The Queen, recently returned from her Asian tour, showed great interest in the young king, whose reign began 1,361 years before Christ. Tutankhamun was then 9 years of age. These remarkable exhibits seem to make time stand still. Her Majesty is looking at objects old before the birth of Christ. "3,000 years ago, the workmanship of the royal regalia was as exquisite as anything we see today." One of the most familiar items on show, the gold mask made of burnished gold inlaid with semi-precious stones. The mask is only one of 50 items sent to this country from Cairo. These objects are insured by the British government for many millions of pounds. It's ironic to think that Tutankhamun should be more widely known today than 3,000 years ago when he ruled in the land of the pharaohs.
As yet unfinished story of Stalingrad epitomizes the inflexible will of the Soviet people. This great city on the Volga, brought to ruin by months of bombing and shelling, has still held out against everything Hitler could bring against it. And the Russian defenders, in spite of their own heavy losses, have not only inflicted terrible wounds on the German army, they have also proved once again that Hitler's promises to the German people are empty boasts he cannot fulfill. This vivid scene at the front shows an incident on the outskirts of the city, a Russian signaller restoring communications. By their amazing defense here, the Russians have struck 3 heavy blows. Strategically, they've wrecked Hitler's plan by halting him to the west of the Volga. They've taught the German soldier that he's very far from invincible, and they've shown the German people that Hitler no longer controls the destiny of the Reich. An obvious comparison with the resistance of Stalingrad is the defense of Verdun in the last war. But there has, of course, been this additional factor in the case of Stalingrad: war in the air. In this medium, too, the Soviet has fought with the utmost energy and courage, and with success. Though Stalingrad has suffered a tremendous weight of bombs, the Red Air Force, in reply, has ripped into the Luftwaffe, still further reducing that slowly wasting asset of the German war machine. In addition, Soviet airmen have struck hard at the enemy divisions attacking the city. For months, the Battle of Stalingrad has shown the fiercest fighting on any front. Here, as Soviet tanks moved forward to attack a strong point, the Germans sent over Messerschmitts against them. But Russian ack-ack gunners soon dealt with that, scoring at least one success while the newsreel man was with the battery. course, the Battle of Stalingrad is also the battle for the Volga, and that great river has itself played a big part, both in defense and attack. Sailing in river gunboats, Soviet Marines have frequently been transported upstream to attack the enemy on the flank, and many successes have been scored. The Volga here is wide but shallow, and navigation is restricted to small vessels with little draft. All the same, under cover of their guns and a smokescreen, the outflanking troops leap ashore and dash into attack in sufficient numbers to do the trick. But it's in the city of Stalingrad itself, among the ruins of homes and factories, that the most savage hand-to-hand fighting has been taking place. In these, the latest newsreel pictures from this front, the stories of street fighting, of the bitter struggles for every yard and for every vantage point, come to life. This is what it's like to defend a great city under constant bombardment from artillery and aircraft, with the enemy in the same street, even in the same ruined building. These pictures were taken in the Red October factory district, where factory workers fought side by side with guardsmen, beating back the Hun, inch by inch, stalking the Hun, and sniping him. The sniper's name is Anatol Chekhov. In a moment, you'll see him make his 41st kill. Down in the street, a storming party undertakes the job of clearing the enemy out of a house they turned into a strong point. Hand to hand, kill or be killed. In the past 6 weeks, Hitler has lost 312,000 killed or captured. Stalingrad's defenders have accounted for many of the dead, killing Germans a dozen at a time, or often enough, one by one. Every dead German provides more weapons for Russia. While they have been winning back the city, their comrades under Golikov and Vatutin have gone over to the offensive with outstanding success miles to the west of the city, isolating many German divisions in the Stalingrad pocket. While the city defenders continue to gain more successes against those divisions, the Red Army drives on to the south and west with astonishing speed. Once more, the world is amazed at the huge reserves of strength which the Soviet Union has been able to call upon. Tremendous trials of strength lie ahead, but coupled with the mounting strength of the Allies to the west and south of Hitler's European fortress, Russia's magnificent recovery points the way. In Libya, Rommel has already run 1,000 miles, while on the huge eastern front, Klim Voroshilov tanks go forward in pursuit of other retreating Germans. Certainly 1943 opens up a new prospect for the Allies and for Hitler.
First pictures of the Battle of Iwo, that small but vital island in the Bonin group between 600 and 700 miles from Tokyo. For 72 days before the landings were made, American planes had been bombing the heavily fortified base, which, though only 8 square miles in extent, contained 2 airfields near the dominating heights of Mount Suribachi, a 500-foot volcano. And 72 days of bombing aren't carried through without accidents and losses. Somehow the pilot escaped and got clear. He was soon picked up and transferred to another ship. But the softening up process wasn't confined to bombing. 10 separate times the Navy, with battleships and a variety of smaller warships, struck at Iwo. 3-day nights of pounding from the sea preceded the landings. Then D-Day itself brought 800 ships and thousands of small landing craft to the shores of the island, which was defended by thousands of Japs, every one of whom was prepared to die for his emperor. Marines of the 4th and 5th Divisions, the first of some 40,000 men, went in towards the beaches under covering fire from their own ships, but also under heavy fire from Japanese batteries in well-concealed rocky positions on the volcanic island. The Japs had spent years fortifying Iwo Jima, for as distance goes in the Pacific, it lies right on Japan's doorstep. Casualties were heavy. 2,000 Marines gave their lives in storming the beaches and advancing towards the first of the airstrips. Through the slit of a tank, one of the cameramen recorded this picture of the attack on Motoyama airfield, the infantry advancing with tanks in support and flame-throwing tanks mopping up pillboxes. There goes a Jap, crawling to cover for the last time. At the end of the second day's fighting, the Marines struck right across the island, cutting through the Jap lines. Transports lying offshore had the somewhat rare experience of receiving prisoners on board, but they were scarce. In 2 weeks' fighting, only 85 surrendered, and half of them were Korean slaves of the Japs. The Battle of Iwo Jima has been described by a Marine general as the toughest in the 168 years of Marine Corps history. But in spite of the ferocity of the fighting and the enormous difficulties of supply, the battle was won. Since then, the Japanese warlords have been holding one emergency conference after another, for their enemies are on their doorstep.
Movietone brings to the screen the first color pictures of the war in Vietnam. Enlarged from action reports released by the American Department of Defense, they present the war with terrible immediacy. The cost of this conflict is a nightmare balance sheet in lives and money. It's costing America at least $1,000 million every month. At least 170,000 Viet Cong have been killed and nearly 7,000 Americans, not to mention the casualties in other South Vietnamese forces and not to mention civilians. Since May last year, 3 British-built hovercraft have been undergoing operational trials in Vietnam. Trials under battle conditions. In combined operations with helicopters, they've proved invaluable. No other vehicle could operate so effectively in such places as the vast plain of reeds near the Cambodian border. Helicopters and hovercraft close in on an enemy hideout. Many of the Viet Cong must adapt themselves to live like water rats in such conditions. No doubt about the hovercraft's effectiveness. In a matter of a few days, they had covered an area which would take 3 months by any other means. A woman is taken away from the battle zone by helicopter. A wounded prisoner is taken aboard one of the hovercraft, where he'll be given immediate treatment during the journey back to base. To date, some 45,000 Viet Cong have been captured. Failing a negotiated settlement in Vietnam, peace may ultimately depend on a superiority of techniques. Machines like the hovercraft could play a significant role in winning that peace. America's vast expenditure on the conquest of space certainly begins to look well worthwhile as the Apollo 14 mission successfully puts the 5th and 6th men on the moon. They're bringing back the largest ever haul of lunar samples and scientific data. Astronauts are a rare and distinguished breed. Alan Shepard, Stuart Rooser, and Edgar Mitchell, the crew of Apollo 14, have proved it yet again. Their extensive training enabled them to put right several last-minute malfunctions. In an unmanned craft, this would have meant abandoning the program. But the crew's courage, their confidence and their unflappability would count for little were it not for the tireless team at Mission Control. Their guidance, advice and ultimate control is essential. Their vigils almost as tense and exhausting as that of the explorers themselves. The countdown over, Apollo 14 has liftoff. 3 more men are bound for the wonders of another world. 47-year-old Shepard, a space veteran and the oldest man to set foot on the moon, embarks with Mitchell on the kangaroo hop that was to be the longest moonwalk. Thick dust hampered their progress in the lunar Fra Mauro Valley, and although they couldn't complete the ascent of the cone crater, otherwise they achieved all they'd set out to do. While Major Russo was to orbit 70 miles above them in the command ship Kitty Hawk, Shepard and Mitchell were to trundle their wheeled vehicle over the crusty's surface. This, of course, is only a rehearsal of that vital task. In only a few years, the unbelievable has become reality. Already we've come to accept it, perhaps a little too readily. The step into space must be hailed as one of man's greatest achievements. Only the future can show if it's the most rewarding.